Future-proof knowledge podcast, mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, future-proof knowledge podcast.
Future-proof knowledge podcast, episode 29. 29. We are live. This week I am joined by the phenomenal forces that are Olive Hickmott and Tana Lara. And we may be joined by Jashon a little bit later. He got held up in a school meeting, I think. But Olive, how have you been keeping this week?
I'm keeping fine, thank you very much. I'm doing well.
Good. And you
lots
brought
more
a friend.
Lots more stuff I'm learning, which also is really good. I brought my friend Gordon the giraffe because whenever I talk to people about what is their spelling and reading like, I quite often say, can you spell giraffe? Because giraffe is a really tricky word for spelling phonically, because you don't really know how many R's and how many F's. And so Gordon has decided to come and join the podcast today, and he's going to be featured on some pictures. I've just sent out a blog as well about him. And the trick is that if we want to be able to spell a word like giraffe, then we need to be able to see it as well as know what it sounds like, and also know what it means. So that's why he walks around with giraffe written on him, to make it easier for the kids to remember how to spell giraffe. That's it.
I love it. Well, welcome, Gordon. And the giraffe is one of my favorite words to get people spelling, because they always go, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And then they do it and they're absolutely delighted.
By the way, has giraffe come out the right way round on the
It has. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
It looks the right way. So that's very impressive too, that it hasn't been reversed.
Yes.
And we are joined again by the amazing Tana Lara. Tana, who brought this topic to the table as well. So Tana, how have you been keeping this week?
I feel so much better. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, you were unwell last week, because we were going to do this one last week, but we couldn't because you were unwell. So it's great to see that you're back to yourself, looking as vibrant as always and ready to rock and roll. You were showing me all your notes before we kicked off, so I'm pretty impressed. That's a hell of a lot more notes than I have anyway. And Olive. But ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be talking about representation for neurodiverse and the disabled communities in the media, because every week we're talking about some element of neurodiversity or some elements of society that maybe don't get as much airtime as they deserve relative to the size of the population they are compared to the rest of us. So it is. I was so happy when Tana brought this topic to me today, because I think it's really important that we discuss representation. And I think for me, right, and maybe this is because I'm a man, right, but I'm delighted to see so many women being brought in terms of, so I love my sports, but being brought in as pundits on in male sports. Now, what I'll say is, I know many, many men who complain and go, this is a disgrace. It's a man's game. Let them talk about the woman's game. And I'll kind of challenge that and go, well, no, the game is the game, and they can comment on it. I always get shot down, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. But I think representation, I think they're missing the point of why it's important for women to be seen in such high profile places, is to encourage those younger women coming up, to show them that there's a pathway to success, and show them that they can bring something different to the table and achieve at a level that maybe a lot of people wouldn't particularly expect them to. And that's why I think having this discussion today about representation is so important for the neurodiverse communities and disabled communities as well. But Tana, I want to bring you in first because I want to talk to you about what was the inspiration behind you bringing this topic up to us to have a discussion on the podcast, and what is it about it that makes you so passionate?
Well, I do our posts for all of our social media. And so I'm always trying to find, obviously, different subjects and content to always post about. And so I'm always trying to find people or inspiration in different, obviously, characters or subject matter. And so I'm always coming across characters, real life or whatever. And so I found, whether it be in literature, media, whatever crosses. And so we had a recent storm in here in Texas, and me and my children, we were discussing how the neurodiverse community, and one of the shows that we all really like and watch, well, a few, Stranger Things, and I did a post about that. The Pit, which I also did a post about that, a character. And then we just started talking about books. And then one that I recently read a couple of months ago, and I told you and Olive how I had been reading movies that I had watched and so on and so forth, were The Outsiders. And a character in there that struck me as possible neuro that was on the spectrum was a character called Soda Pop Curtis. And I looked up and researched, and there has been reference to him being on the neurodiverse scale. And so it just, trickling down, domino effect. And I was like, I just wonder how many characters, even in classic literature, that were possible neurodiverse that were never really spoken about. And then, of course, I just looked more and more up into it. And I just think it's something that, of course, I'm glad it's always kind of been there. And, um, yes, there is representation, but I just don't think it's ever really anything that's discussed. It's there, but never really, it's always kind of in the shadows. So I think it's something that is like, there was a post I did also where there was this young child in Target, and it went viral. Like, he was so happy that he saw himself in a Target ad where he was disabled and he was in a wheelchair. And I think we need more representation like that, because when you see yourself represented like that, it does bring out something in you, and it helps you evolve. It's an evolve of your self-worth, of that, hey, I'm here, I'm shown, and it gives you self-worth. And I think that's in any community, but also too with neurodiverse, so it doesn't make you feel less than, and it doesn't alienate you. And I think that's really good for any learning disability.
That's absolutely spot on. Yeah. We've been joined by Jashon Mills. Jashon, how are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. How's everybody doing on this fabulous Tuesday?
It's like the Brady Bunch. We've got the 4 cameras up in the air. That's where we are. But Tana's just been talking to us about the inspiration behind bringing this topic to us to discuss today, and I really like your description there, Tana, about how, while be it disability, be it neurodiversity, is always in the media, it's not necessarily always front and center, and it's not always necessarily showing the positive elements of people's diversity, whatever that might be. And like, definitely over the last few years, there's been more shows coming out. Like, I don't know if anyone's watched Atypical.
That's another one I was going to say.
Yeah. I watched that, and I really liked the way they handled it, because it was trying to show the challenges that the main character, and even the fact that it was a main character, that was
Mhm.
first and foremost a bit of a change, but showed the challenges that the character and the family and wider circle around that character experienced because this person didn't follow the typical way of acting or being, and yet you could see the brilliance of the character. You could see the wonder that the character brought, and I just found that really powerful. And I think the way that series went, it kind of moved away from that towards the end, and it,
Mhm.
I'm sure they have to hit kind of the what's going to keep it popular and stuff like that. But even just having a main character where the discussion is out there, and it's really really important to have people kind of interacting and talking about it. But Jashon, I suppose I'm going to come to you next to kind of get your take on some of the neurodiverse people you've seen get highlighted in the media, not in a tokenistic way, or people with disabilities, again, not in a tokenistic way, but in a way where their experience, what they bring to the table, is shown in a light that is highlighting the valuable aspects of what they bring, if anything.
Well, in the media, there's not much representation. I know there was a show that might still be airing that was about individuals with autism and their love lives and their relationships that they had with others. And that was for me, I thought it was very powerful because it gave the broad public a chance to see that, just because somebody has autism, maybe they might not be able to have a job. They may have a job. They might not be able to communicate well. They may have special tics or hand flapping, but they are still able to be in a positive relationship and still have children, still raise a family, and that there's really no restriction or limitation to what they can do. Um, I think having shows like that is just, it more so just puts an eye on the disabilities or abilities, and shows that, just because somebody has these diversities, that it doesn't limit them to what they can do. They still have feelings. You pick on them, you call them names. If they can love, they can also be hurt. So by showing that in real life on TV, that look, these people have feelings, they fall in love, they have families, they have kids. Um, Without directly saying it, shows that they also have feelings and they hurt and they can feel disrespected and they can feel belittled by people. Um, when I found out my son had autism, first thing I wanted to do is make sure that the world knew. And I bought a bunch of t-shirts and I put decals on my car, and none of them were to be taken serious. Like a bumper sticker on my back glass right now. Um, Autism, it's what is this? It's not a different ability, or it's not a disability, it's a different ability. So just putting out small signals like that to people, they may just glance at it, they may just see it for a second, but it plants a seed. So the next time they are in the grocery store or they're at Walmart or wherever they're shopping and they see somebody with one of these disabilities, that little seed that was planted might be like, oh, let me give this a person that hand if it's something they're having trouble with. I've been in line and I've seen people with disabilities, physical disabilities that have nothing to do with the neuro. I've seen people with neuro disabilities and see them struggling with something. It makes me want to stop and say, here, let me give you a hand. Hang on, people, wait 1 second. Let's take care of this person. And I found by just those small messages, by putting it out there, um, it just plants seeds. So I'm like Johnny Appleseed. Everywhere I go, I'm planting seeds and they're going to sprout. And the more people that know, it makes it more acceptable. Yeah, that's kind of my thought on it.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's about, for all of us, trying to find how we can try and have an impact in the best way possible that we can. And Olive, I want to kind of talk to you because I suppose now you can tell me to shut up if you want, but like for me, I look at you and you've been a bit of a trailblazer in many ways. You know, not only with creating the empowering learning program, but you know, even just the conversations we've had about your career, like obviously being a woman and going to university and having a maths degree, I could imagine you probably weren't among tons and tons of women in those classes, or am I totally wrong? Like, or was it mainly men? And I'm wondering what kind of experience you had being a woman in that environment. Was it, or was there any challenges at all, or were you just accepted as just one of the gang?
I was very lucky to get a job without seemingly any discrimination at all. And I was a software engineer after I finished my maths degree. I remember one conference I went to in the UK, and there was a whole conference hall of people. I really can't remember the topic, but it must have been something to do with what I was doing, because I'd graduated quite a few years by that time. And there must have been 300 men in the audience and 4 women. And strangely enough, I went over to America and to another conference the following week. It was about 50-50. It was completely
Wow.
different environment. The topics weren't that different. They were all about what I was doing, which was being a software engineer and running projects and whatever. And but the audience was completely different. And I'll follow on from what you were saying about Hidden Geniuses. There's a program running at the moment in the UK, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's a competition, if you like, where they're getting in a lot of people who didn't do well at school, but have always felt that they are brighter than has ever come out in the world, and they are actually giving them Mensa tests, or adapted ones anyway. And the thing I don't know what it's called. I think it might be called Hidden Genius or something, but it's done in a very light-hearted way. And one of the contestants said, the best thing about this is I feel I found my tribe, because there's like 12 people in a room and they're all one at a time. They're going off to do the tests and they're talking to each other, and they are so pleased to be finding other people who struggle at school and thought that they could do more than they've been able to.
I think it's called Secret Genius. I think I just had a
Yes,
quick
you
look
might
there.
be right.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Like today, I was running a program. So in one of the schools locally, they asked me to come in and work with a group of 50ers, so 16, 17-year-olds who have no interest in school. But they're attending. So they're not those school refusers or school avoiders. They are attending, but they've no interest. So they asked me to come in and work with them to try and look at future planning and how we could try and encourage them to see out essentially the next year and just finish and get their qualifications. But also I'm working with the parents as well to try so the parents understand the work that the students are doing, and I'm giving the parents some extra techniques and understanding of what might be driving their child way of being in the world. And today we were talking about, and I think I felt a bit sorry for the parents because I was kind of talking to them about how if we're constantly fighting or arguing with our kids around their application, or you're not living up to your potential, or you could, like I hate could do better coming home on a report card for any child, because nobody knows. So like one of the parents, I was saying, she was talking about her child, and I was saying, well, how do any of us know what our potential is? Like, How do you quantify that? So I was kind of saying, no, I wasn't arguing with her, but I was saying, maybe your child turning up for school and not losing his shit in school and being quiet but not doing homework and not really being interested in it, maybe that is the best that he can do in school in the environment that he's in. And she was like, yeah, I suppose I never thought of that. So what I was trying to talk about was the underlying messages that we give to our kids. And we all do it. I've done it as a parent. So I wasn't pointing any fingers that I wasn't pointing at myself. Like the underlying unspoken messages that we give to our kids, that getting a leaving cert in Ireland is really important. Going to university is really important. And working really hard is really important. And dedicating yourself. And yet I look back at my leaving cert and like I didn't do well at all because I didn't apply myself because I was bored in school. I did not like school at all. The only subject I enjoyed in school was PE because I loved sport and I loved just taking part in sport. So I completely understand if my parents turned around to me and said, Alan, you're not fulfilling your potential. You're wasting your talents. But that was my path. Now, thankfully, they didn't say that. Maybe they said it to themselves and to each other, but they didn't say it to me anyway. But we're so invested in our children's lives. And I think what really struck me, Tana, when you brought this topic up was the underlying message, not the overt message, but the underlying message that yes, we'll accept neurodiversity. Yes, we'll accept disability, but don't have me employ someone who's disabled. Don't have me employ someone with autism. Don't have me employ somebody who struggles to interact with people on a personal level, because then I'm not necessarily as tolerant. So Tana, I want you to kind of give me some examples of the underlying messages that you've seen through the media, positive and negative, in relation to neurodiverse people and people with disabilities.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was like, you brought up atypical, where that was the forefront. That was like the protagonist. That was like the shining, like that was what the subject, like that was what the, how can I say, we knew that that was what neurodiversity was, the subject matter. That was what we knew. But then, like I said, everything else, all the other underlining, it was like we still were kept in the shadows. Like, is it really the neurodiversity subject or not? Are they or aren't they? So it was like somebody I thought about was Dwight in The Office. Everybody said that
That's
he
literally
wasn't.
who I was thinking about.
They were like, is he or isn't he? And his brother Mo, is his brother? Yeah. Are they or aren't they? So and another subject I thought of was like Patch Adams. All those, there were so many. When I started really thinking about it, I was like, no, there is a lot of representation. There was. I thought of the movie 9 to 5. I remember seeing when those three women, Dolly Parton, Fonda, what's her name, and Lily Tomlin, when they started rearranging the office and they brought disability people in. And I was like, you know what, there is quite a bit of representation. There was, but that was never in the forefront. So should it be in the forefront, like atypical, where it's like, no, this is what the subject matter is? Or do we still keep it to where we don't really say it is neurodiversity, but we just kind of put them in there? So which is better?
There's no easy answer, I don't think, is there?
No, because, but you know, that's a really, fine line, because then people kind of like, well, is this person just an introvert, or because then you don't want to start messing up and saying, well, then like you say, everybody can say, oh, it's just my my ADHD and really bad today. And it's just like, well, no, don't just like start jumping on the bandwagon and everybody is, like you really don't have it. You're just it's not, that's not it. So I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I think it's not um clear cut, but I do wonder about how, like, the reality is 15 to 20% of the population, the world's population, are neurodiverse. That's, the official statistics, but the unofficial statistics reckon it's probably closer to 40%. So nearly half of the population will have some form of neurodiversity, because we are on a spectrum, and that's just the way it is. And like all of you said before, we are all on that spectrum at some point, and we will move up and down, and in terms of different interactions that we have with people, and in terms of the skill sets that we have. But should we then have those neurodiverse people or disabled people being represented as much, where they're not just there because of their neurodiversity or their disability, but that they're just a regular person in society? What do you reckon to that, Jashon?
Me again, I don't like to hide or cover up things. I personally, when FPK gets large enough where we start hiring by the masses, I want to hire neurodiverse individuals based off from what their neurodiversity are. I hate even saying that. Everyone's different. So neurotypical means you're typically crazy, typically this, typically that. Everyone has something. There's no two people alike. But if I'm going to hire, I want to advertise that this is what I'm looking for: someone who can focus and who can code, let's say. There, if you look online and look up like Fortune 500 companies, you'll find tons of CEOs that talk highly of their neurodiverse employees, because for some people, their diversity means that they're hyper focused, and you put them on a task and they want to get that task done, and that's what their diversity strength is. So as a business owner, I would prefer to have somebody that their diversity is to focus on a certain task and see it through to the end, than to have somebody who's non neurodiverse, who's worried about, oh, who's texting me right now? Oh, I've got this party after work, and their mind is all over the place. But you can find individuals in the neurodiverse job pool that are perfect fits for different positions within a company. So if I own a company, if FPK starts to hire, I'd rather hire people starting with the neurodiverse population, because their strengths are strengths for my company, strengths for my business. Their strengths can help me succeed. I help them succeed by employing them and letting them know that there's a place for them. There's several places here in Oregon. I know there's a couple restaurants. I know there's a car wash that all they hire is people on the spectrum, and they don't have any problems with the employees. The employees love to come to work because they have a place to be. And when they're at work, they're all about work, and they're all about their customer service, because they're happy to have a job and they're doing something they love, and someone gave them a chance. So I personally think it's okay, and I would like to see more companies, whether they're on Indeed posting jobs, saying, we are looking for you. If you have some neurodiversities, bring your strengths to us now. We want you. You are the perfect employee. Because in most cases, they make better employees than others. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't think it should be stigmatized. I think it should
yeah, I
be
agree.
highlighted.
And like I remember meeting with a business owner uh, probably about a year or so ago, and they went out of their way to employ a couple of people with Down syndrome, and they sat down with the families and with the person themselves and said, "What are you capable of doing? Where your strengths lie, and we'll get you in that role that you can do that, and we will have the understanding that uh, this takes you this amount of time to do it, and that it will get done, and that you look at what supports we can put in place for you." And what was fascinating talking to that business owner was they were fascinated by the response from the other staff who treated this person as a just another member of staff.
As an equal.
Yeah, that's exactly the word, as an equal. They were taking the piss out of them. They were having the crack. They were all having their jokes, and I'm not taking the piss out of uh, the fact that they had Down syndrome, but just the general stuff like the banter that there would be. And they were saying that the families of these people were coming back going, that's just what my child needed. They just wanted to feel normal. They just wanted to feel like everybody else. And here they're actually experiencing a normal life, which is absolutely fine. And all it took was a bit of adaptation from the employers and an understanding from the staff that this is what we expect of them, this is their role, and this is how long it's probably going to take them to do it. So we will adapt to them as opposed to trying to get them to come and adapt to how you want to operate things, because they may not have the strengths to be able to do that just yet. So what we don't want is them feeling like another knock, another failure, another, oh well, I'm definitely not normal. Here's something to reinforce it. And Olive, like, I'm going to bring you in because, like, when we look at the range of young people you've worked with over the years, like, one of the most powerful things you've brought is the understanding that in order for anybody to learn, they must be able to control their visual field and control their emotional state. And why that is so important to start to look at doing before we ever try to get people learning, whether they're neurodiverse or not. How did that come to you, Olive? Like, what was it that really made you go, no, this is what we need to do before we try, we got to walk before we can run?
Okay. One of the things I learned really early on was it wasn't the students' problem to a large extent. It was very much the environment around them, whether that was parents or business colleagues or students or whatever it was. That was one thing I learned. I started talking to, to start with, I worked with dyslexics probably only. And I started talking to them. I don't know why, come to think of it, but about what they enjoyed doing. I think it was really to break the ice more than anything else. And so I started chatting to them about what they enjoyed doing and what they were good at. And that was a light bulb moment for me and for the parents often, because the parents would say quietly that I brought this child here because they've got all these challenges and you're talking to them about what they're good at. And I went, well, there's two reasons for that. Firstly is, one is that'll cheer them up to talk about what they're good at. Even if they don't think they're good at very much, we can find something. I mean, I used to say to kids, if they used to say, but I can't do anything, I go, okay, do you do PlayStation? Because this was back in the day. And do you do PlayStation? Yep, okay, yes, I'm quite good at that. And so I would go, okay, what's your favorite game? Now explain to me how you do your favorite game, because I don't know anything about PlayStations. So you tell me about it. And by the time they finished, they were thinking, they were thinking they were better than me at PlayStation. So that was cheering them up. And the second thing was, how could they use what they were good at to do something else. So if they got a great visual memory for all sorts of things, why can't they have a visual memory for words? Because it's only a small leap. And so that's really how I started doing that. And I always talk, even now, the first thing I do is ask them what they're good at. And what I did manage to do was to, about 2 years ago now, was to collect together a list of the things that neurodivergent students are really good at. And if you, I train, I don't train, I work with adults as well. And you always find with adults, they don't think they're very good at anything because they've had so many years of not being good at anything. And you start asking them, well, what do you like at creativity? What do you like at curiosity? What do you like at problem solving? And quite suddenly they go, oh, I can do those and I can do those. So I have a list now of 40 things that I've collected together. And normally, most people I'm working with who are struggling have got more than 25 of these really great skills. Some of them are up in the 30s. And so that's a real light bulb moment for them, is that they now know what they're good at. And I think, going back to your question originally, when we're employing somebody, I think it's absolutely vital we change the recruitment process to actually pick out what we want in that job, what we are looking for, and how people can grow into it, rather than going, this is having a very bland system and not very much detail. And I often talk about spiky profiles, that people are really good at some things and really dreadful at others. So can we please encourage them to get even better at the things they're good at? And some of the things they're not very good at, well, probably don't matter anyway.
Yeah, and I think, like, in reality, a spiky profile is life. Like, it is business, it is everything, because there will be things that we're good at and some things that we're not. Like, us as an FPK team, we all have very different strengths, and we all have very different things that we're not as good at. And that's where, as we build out everything, it is, well, where we can acknowledge the things that we're not maybe as strong at, so that we can actually make the right hires in place and put people in place so that they can actually take that strength and build on it and be part of a whole, which is really important. It's why in sports there are people for different positions. And, like, so in life, we got to find ways to empower our kids to understand that that's how things work out, that's how things could be built. And then we need to actually build that in reality. So Tana, like, talk to me a little bit about your experience in the real world of the acceptance or lack of people with neurodiversity or people with disability in where you live. Like, do you see, is there visibility for people with Down syndrome or with disabilities or with very obvious neurodiversities? Like, do they get those jobs? Do they get those roles that that maybe traditionally they wouldn't?
I think with disabilities, yes, it took a long time. I remember here in Texas, HEB is really good about that. It's a grocery store. I love HEB. Here in Texas, they're a ride or die.
HEB is where it's at.
They are amazing. They do so much for the community. They give back. They do a feast of sharing every year. They give to communities of everything, of all different. And they hire a lot of people with from the different communities, and they hire people from that. Anyway, so I love HEB. They hire them. So for that, as far as neurodiversity, I'm not too sure. But I would see that they would not discriminate anyway. in that sector. But anything else? I don't know. I do see people with disabilities here and there, of obvious disabilities. Um, and as far as neurodivergent, my hope with neurodiversity, um, I would hope that eventually it's not something that you would think about, that it's just like second nature, like breathing. I think with people in the obvious disability, special needs, like special, there's Special Olympics and everything like that. That's just something I think we all had to kind of eventually get to the point where it was just like breathing, like you think about it and it's just second nature now. I would hope, especially like how we're talking about, when you see yourself represented, it is just second nature and it becomes just worldly. And we just accept it. And I think it's so good now that it's more so like with shows like Atypical and everything, that it's becoming part of our society. And so that when people get hired, like it's not like, oh, well, do they have neurodiverse, tendencies or whatever? No, it's like, oh, okay, they have that, or it's not even thought of. It's just like, how is this person? Not how is this neurodiverse person? How is this special needs person? No, they're just a person. There's not even, like Jashon said, any labels. They're
Yeah,
just a person.
yeah,
So
that's
I think
fantastic.
that's I think that's how, in a perfect world, it should be. Not any. I know. There is a way to be distinguished, but it's in certain ways, for certain reasons, they're just a person.
Yeah, and I was chatting to you guys before we went live about an Irish language cartoon that came out a few years ago called Punky, and in Punky is the main character, and she has Down syndrome, and it's so powerful in showing Punky's life and her experience in a very child friendly way. And Punky, so punk in Irish means dot. So it's essentially dotty in English. But it is such a wonderful um, cartoon because it shows Punky living a regular life like we're talking about, and that she doesn't have to hide away. And I suppose if we look back at history, like for the longest time, people with uh, disabilities or people with neurodiversities, they were kept away from society. They were kept behind closed doors. They were put into asylums. They were, you know, kept in basements. They were like, it was, there was something wrong with them because now a lot of it was probably to do with understanding. And thankfully, we understand a hell of a lot more now, and we understand that individuals, well, look, the UN Charter of Rights, everyone is entitled to be treated with fairness and entitled to education, all that kind of stuff, no matter what their background is. Whether that actually gets implemented or not is another day's conversation. But it's relatively new in the history of human beings that neurodiverse or disabled people are being seen as, I won't say equals, but closer to equals, um, which is really good. But I'm curious, Jashon, how could you see things to be amplified? So, what can the wider media do to start to show very obvious neurodiverse people in a light to help people understand? Is it more shows like Atypical? Is it more shows like Love on the Spectrum? Are those the types of things that people need to see, or is there other things that could help amplify so that we normalize then these neurodiversities or these disabilities?
Um, Two things on that one. Where Hope Grows, amazing television show. Movie from 2015. Kid with Down syndrome works in a grocery store. Uh, male shopper who comes in all the time, kind of picks at him all the time, but they build this bond and this relationship. More shows like that, and I mentioned that show because it's absolutely freaking hilarious. And as funny as it is, it'll still make you cry just because it's like, oh my gosh, how can this just be? But I think the biggest thing is for media, news, need to stop. It's what they need to stop and not. So they need to stop highlighting the challenges that neurodiverse people face, and start talking about the strengths. You can be in a crowd of 200 people and maybe 5 or 6 people have a visual noticeable diversity, but there's 100 others out there that it's not seen physical. You don't see what it is, and they may be full on the spectrum, but you just can't tell by looking at them. So I think just as society, as media, we just need to start highlighting people's strengths all the time and stop identifying people based off from their deficits. And too often in news, they lead the story with this individual with Down syndrome, well, this individual did this. Do we have to highlight that? That's like saying this black guy, this white guy. None of that matters. What are you getting at? There doesn't have to be a label. Just identify what the person is doing. If you're talking about an individual who did something great, or in a movie, or you're doing an advertisement with a person with a diversity, don't make it about the diversity, make it about the strengths, because just because you can see their diversity, there's a million others that you can't see. So there's no reason to point out this is this Down syndrome guy. No, this gentleman here who has this strength did this amazing thing. Who cares if he has Down syndrome? That's not what the story's about. I mean, everybody has something. So it's just, we need to stop tying the disability to the person. And I think that's the biggest problem. And once we can get past that, people will just start seeing people for their different abilities.
Yeah, so it's highlighting the ability rather than the disability. And I've seen a lot more like posters and stuff around where, say, people parking in disabled spots and getting out and walking into the shop and people going, oh, you're a disgrace parking in that disabled spot. And there's a bit of a campaign to kind of get people to understand that not all disabilities are visible. So like we're saying, what we get a lot here in the media is this migrant did this at the moment. That's the hot one at the moment over here in Ireland, because the migrants are ruining everything, because they're not the ones who are actually working and trying to build up a career. But anyway, Olive, I want you to give us some examples of some of those skills that you've seen, following on from what Jashon was talking about, and you've developed those 40 skills that a lot of the neurodiverse people you work with have, so that people can start to amplify those. So give us some examples.
Right. Just before I do that, I just want to say the media, as we all know, is very negative biased. So it is about disasters, things that go wrong. I know people think that, putting out positive news is very happy clappy. But on the other hand, I think the balance is ridiculous at the moment. It's not 50-50. It's like 1% happy news, if you're lucky, on a trailer on the news of hours and hours of some of the presidents around the world who are doing stupid things. And so I think that's a really important fact, is that if we can shift the news to being happy messages, then we might shift some of the people who have struggled with it. I think at the moment, people know that having ADHD in school is a real struggle. I don't think we need to keep reinforcing that. What we need to keep reinforcing is how well they are doing now or the things they were doing well in school. And I think the sports analogy is perfect. I mean, I've been watching the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, for the last couple of days. Those people are absolutely incredible. I cannot believe how you can do some of that stuff. And I'm sure that they're probably rubbish at some other things. But we don't talk about that. We just celebrate what they're good at. And now I've forgotten Alan's question.
My question was around some of your 40.
My 40,
talents.
sorry, my 40. Well, I'll start off with creativity. That is really always high. And most of these are underpinned by great mental images, by the way. So creativity is. I've worked recently with several dyslexic creative writers. Now that sounds like a bit of that's impossible. But once you get them being able to spell and read, they can do an even better job at being creative, because a creative writer will see the whole story in their imagination and then try and write it down. So there's that. There's curiosity, permanent curiosity. I mean, I struggle with this one. I am permanently curious as to the next interesting thing that fits into my jigsaw puzzle. Problem solving, nearly always really good at problem solving, whether it's in the family, whether it's, something that's broken in the house or whatever it is, problem solving. Intuition, knowing what's going on and not knowing why they know what's going on, but knowing what's picking up on other people's vibes. So when you, one of the things you can do is be very in tune with other people's emotions, which can be completely overwhelming, or it can be a huge benefit depending on what you're trying to do. So there's making quantum leaps, coming out with, do you remember the film that came out with The Answer Was 42? Suddenly knowing what the answer to something is. Confidence can be great, it could be overwhelming, or I will say about this, almost all of them can be completely overwhelming or completely underwhelming. So you get things like confidence. You can have too much confidence that you go and make mistakes, or you can have too little confidence that you never do anything. And so you see the flip side of this coin all the time. Do you want me to go on?
No, that was probably enough for now. We can definitely delve back in and bring some more to the table next time. So as we move to kind of a wrap up, and Tana, I'll come to you last because I want to get wrap ups from you. But Jashon, have you anything that you want to leave the listeners with, or any final thoughts that you think would be useful?
Don't be afraid to highlight your neurodiversities. Wear it as a badge of honor, and don't take it too serious. I mean, I've got all kinds of jokes around my son and around being autistic and the different behaviors. If you see my hands flappy, you know I'm happy. You know what I'm saying? It's just people take things too serious. So be lighthearted about it. Everyone could take a joke, neurodiverse or not. If you are pulling back because you're being sensitive, you're not doing anybody any favors. Treat everybody just as equally, whether you know they have a neurodiversity or not. Just everyone is everybody. I guess that'd be the main thing. And to touch on something Olive said, I actually wrote a paper, so not much has changed since I was in high school. I wrote a paper and it was on the news, and it was about the fact that your nightly news is 1 hour. You get 57 minutes of the worst news about everything that's happened in the city, around the world, and the last 3 minutes of a fire department saved a cat from a tree. Have a good night. That needs to be flipped around 100% on its head.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just not going to happen because we as human beings have shown that we are more likely to interact with something that triggers us negatively than if something that triggers us positively, unfortunately. And
Tragedy
that's why social
sells.
media, tragedy sells, absolutely. And Tana, again, thank you so much for bringing this topic to the forefront. I don't think we're finished yet. We'll definitely be coming back to it. But have you any final wrap up thoughts for the listeners or anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about?
Kind of like what Jashon said. Be nice to your neighbors. Reach out to people that you don't think. We have so much more in common than we don't think. Don't be afraid to say hi to people when you don't think that, they're just sitting there. Um, you know, um, be kind, like you're always saying. Be kind to people. Goes a long way. Um, don't be afraid of people's differences. Read more. Look at all the spectrum of people. Notice all the little differences because that's what counts. And pay attention to people because you never know when somebody's having a bad day and something that you say to somebody really can affect them in the long run. You don't know when somebody's having that bad day and what you say really does affect them, maybe.
Yeah, positive or negative.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we don't know the impact we can have.
So ask somebody to sit at your table. You may make their day.
Brilliant. And Olive, final word to Gordon. How has Gordon found his first podcast, Gordon the Giraffe?
Well, he must have got a bit fed up with his label because 5 minutes ago he just dropped it on the floor. But I think he's great.
That's a great metaphor, Olive, for what we've just been discussing. Gordon dropped his label. There you go. Absolutely
100.
brilliant.
I must tell you this story though. That do you realise that if a cuddly toy has eyes that aren't level, when they turn round, they've got different expressions. So you go from curiosity to something else as you turn their head.
Brilliant. I love it. Well,
Gordon, how are you doing?
Gordon, thanks so much for your contribution. You have made the podcast what it's been. Olive, Jashon, Tana, thank you all so much for bringing such brilliant, diverse conversations to the discussion. I would be lost without you guys. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will be back again next week with another future-proof knowledge. Until then, look after yourselves.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK.